Imagine unearthing a 2,000-year-old machine that shouldn't exist, buried beneath the sea, corroded, cracked, and barely recognizable. And yet, somehow, it's more advanced than anything its era was believed to be capable of. A device so intricate that modern scientists are still decoding it more than a century after its discovery. It could predict eclipses, track the movements of planets, and even time the ancient Olympic Games. And the discovery? Pure accident. A team of sponge divers thought they'd pulled up scrap metal until they looked closer. This isn't fiction. This isn't science fantasy. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, real, ancient, and utterly mind-blowing. Welcome to Armchair Archaeology, where we uncover the secrets of the past, one impossible artifact at a time. Stay with us, because before this video ends, we'll reveal a single number, hidden in ancient bronze, that proves this machine was centuries ahead of its time. Before we dive into the wreck itself, make sure you hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a discovery. Here on Armchair Archaeology, the past is always one clue away from blowing your mind. In the spring of 1901, a group of sponge divers were forced to anchor near the rocky Greek island of Antikythera, halfway between Kythera and Crete. While exploring the seabed for sponges, one diver resurfaced in shock. He described seeing marble statues, lifeless bodies, and something that looked like a ruined temple beneath the water. At first, the crew assumed he was suffering from nitrogen narcosis, a hallucination caused by deep diving. But when others descended, they confirmed the impossible: a vast, ancient shipwreck, untouched for nearly 2,000 years. That's before the Roman Empire reached its peak, when Julius Caesar was still a teenager. The Greek government launched what became the world's first underwater archaeological expedition. What they recovered was dazzling: bronze and marble statues, jewelry, amphorae, fine glassware, and coins. The ship, dated to around 70 BCE, likely carried luxury goods from the eastern Mediterranean, possibly on their way to Rome. But among the spectacular finds, one object drew little interest: a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood, cracked into multiple fragments, was quietly stored in the back rooms of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. It was listed simply as an unidentified bronze object, and for decades, that's all it was. Unbeknownst to anyone, this humble-looking artifact would prove more important than any statue or jewel. Inside its corroded shell, sealed away by centuries of sediment and salt, were dozens of delicate, interlocking gears, machined from bronze with a level of precision no one believed ancient people could achieve. No steel tools, no magnifying lenses, just craftsmanship so precise it rivals early modern watchmaking. It was a mechanical system centuries ahead of its time, hiding in plain sight. No inscriptions pointed to its purpose, no texts described how to build one. And at the time, no one had any idea that this strange object, pulled from the bottom of the Aegean, would change everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. After the excitement of the Antikythera shipwreck faded, many of the recovered objects were catalogued and quietly stored away. Among them was a strange, encrusted lump of bronze and decayed wood, fragmented, brittle, and fused together by centuries of underwater corrosion. It didn't resemble anything beautiful or useful. Unlike the statues or coins, it wasn't put on display. Instead, it sat in storage, labeled vaguely as a bronze gear or navigational instrument. For over a year, it drew no serious attention until 1902, when Valerios Stais, an archaeologist working at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, noticed something peculiar. Peeking through the corrosion was a tiny, regular edge, something that looked like the teeth of a gear. To Stais, this wasn't debris, it was a mechanism. His suggestion that the artifact might be part of a sophisticated machine was met with polite doubt. Scholars at the time couldn't imagine the ancient Greeks producing devices with precision-cut gears. The prevailing image of classical antiquity was philosophical and artistic, not mechanical. Finding gear teeth in ancient debris was like finding a USB port in a pharaoh's tomb. Gears, if anything, belonged to modern clocks, not to the ancient world. And yet, the more closely the fragments were examined, the harder they were to ignore. Embedded in the corroded mass were repeating patterns, circular plates, and what looked like axles. This wasn't the chaos of chance, it was the signature of design. Still, without the means to see inside, most historians moved on. The mechanism was too damaged, and technology too limited to go further. But the gear teeth told a different story, one hinting at complexity and purpose. Slowly, the idea began to form. This wasn't an isolated oddity. It could be evidence of a lost tradition of ancient engineering, one that had been hiding in plain sight, disguised as junk. And if you're hungry for more lost technologies, legendary cities, and forgotten civilizations, check out our ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World. The link's in the pinned comment below. Your next archaeological rabbit hole awaits. For most of the 20th century, the fragments of the so-called bronze mechanism remained an archaeological enigma. Scholars had seen the gear teeth, but the pieces were too fragile to dismantle, and corrosion made it impossible to examine the interior by eye. Without context or comparable artifacts, the object was a puzzle with no known solution, its true nature locked beneath centuries of oxidation. In the 1970s, that began to change. British physicist and historian Derek de Solla Price teamed up with Greek radiologist Charalambos Karakalos to take the first X-ray images of the largest fragments. What they found astonished them. Inside the cracked metal were layers of finely cut bronze gears, some stacked, others angled, working together in an intricate system. These weren't decorative or improvised. They were engineered components, built with mathematical precision and designed to move in concert. Price later wrote that it was like finding a modern jet engine in the ruins of a Greek temple. In the early 2000s, a new international team, led by mathematician Tony Freeth and mechanical engineer Michael Wright, pushed the investigation even further. Using advanced 3D X-ray tomography and surface imaging, they uncovered something even more revealing. Inscriptions, tiny Greek lettering carved into the surfaces of the plates, offered labels and explanations, almost like a built-in instruction manual. It became clear that the mechanism wasn't merely ornamental or symbolic. One dial tracked the solar year, another modeled the moon's cycle, others were linked to positions of the known planets. The mechanism didn't just reflect the sky, it simulated its motion. The fragments had transformed from a mysterious relic into something unprecedented, a hand-cranked machine that brought the cosmos down to Earth, built not by modern minds, but by ancient hands. Once researchers confirmed that the fragments belonged to a mechanical device, the next step was to figure out how it worked. But this was no simple restoration. The Antikythera Mechanism was broken into over 80 pieces, many warped, incomplete, or too delicate to handle. There were no instructions, no known replicas, and no references in surviving ancient texts. Rebuilding it meant resurrecting knowledge lost for 2 millennia. Enter Michael Wright, a British engineer and former curator at London's Science Museum. Where earlier scholars had focused on diagrams, Wright used machine shop tools and micro-focus X-rays to build a working replica, gears, axles, dials, and all. His model revealed not only that the mechanism functioned, but that it was astonishingly efficient. Turn a small crank, and the entire system moved like clockwork, advancing multiple calendars and celestial indicators at once. Wright's work was soon followed by a major collaboration led by Tony Freeth. Using CT scans and 3D modeling, his team digitally reconstructed the internal structures without physically disturbing the fragments. This allowed them to test new theories and uncover gear arrangements too subtle to observe by hand. They also deciphered previously hidden inscriptions, texts that labeled cycles, celestial markers, and even specific functions. What emerged wasn't just a machine, it was a universe in miniature. The gears modeled time, motion, and even planetary irregularities, all within a device no larger than a shoebox. For the first time in over 2 millennia, the mechanism moved again, its gears turning just as they once did in the hands of an ancient engineer. It demonstrated not only engineering skill, but theoretical knowledge of astronomy centuries ahead of its time. This wasn't a one-off gadget or a decorative toy. It was a purpose-built computer, analog, mechanical, and breathtakingly precise. It was no longer silent. The past was in motion. Could this have been the world's first attempt to turn the cosmos into code? Once the gear systems were reconstructed, researchers could finally ask the big question: what exactly was this machine designed to do? The answer was more astonishing than anyone expected. At its core, the Antikythera Mechanism was a mechanical calculator, a device powered by a hand crank that could predict astronomical phenomena with incredible precision. One side of the machine displayed a solar calendar based on the Egyptian system of 365 days. Another tracked a 19-year lunar cycle called the Metonic cycle, which aligned the solar and lunar years. This ensured that festivals and rituals could remain in sync with celestial events. But the real surprise came on the back panel. There, 2 spiral dials charted even more complex cycles. One seemed to track eclipses. The mechanism didn't just mark when they would happen. It indicated the type, direction, and even the timing of each eclipse. Tiny symbols next to the dates acted like predictive glyphs. Other components displayed the moon's position in the zodiac, its phase, and even its variable speed as it moved through its elliptical orbit. A small rotating sphere, half light and half dark, mimicked the moon's waxing and waning in real time. On the front, another dial tracked major athletic festivals, including the Olympic Games, which were closely tied to religious calendars. This suggests that the device wasn't just scientific, it was civic and sacred. Piece by piece, the mechanism revealed itself as an all-in-one astronomical system. It could chart solar years, lunar months, eclipses, zodiac positions, and event calendars, all with a few turns of a crank. In essence, it was an ancient all-in-one calendar, almanac, and observatory. The level of integration is what makes it so extraordinary. This wasn't just a machine that showed time. It modeled the entire rhythm of the cosmos, built by people we once assumed lacked the tools to even imagine it. What do you think? Was the Antikythera Mechanism a one-off, or just the tip of an ancient tech iceberg? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing your theories. With the Antikythera Mechanism's capabilities laid bare, one question remained. Who, in the ancient world, had the knowledge and the tools to build it? The shipwreck was dated to around 70 BCE, but the mechanism itself may have been older. Based on the Greek inscriptions and astronomical models encoded in the gears, scholars traced its origin to the Eastern Mediterranean, possibly the island of Rhodes. In antiquity, Rhodes was home to a renowned school of astronomy and mechanics. One of its greatest minds was Hipparchus, an astronomer and mathematician who lived in the 2nd century BCE. He's credited with discovering the precession of the equinoxes and creating the first trigonometric tables. The lunar motion model found in the Antikythera Mechanism closely resembles one described in his writings. It's possible the mechanism was designed by his students, or even built using data from his lost works. Others point to Archimedes, the legendary inventor from Syracuse who lived about a century earlier. Though best known for his work in physics and mathematics, ancient texts also describe Archimedes constructing mechanical devices that modeled the motions of celestial bodies. Could the Antikythera Mechanism be a descendant of that legacy? These weren't mythical wizards. They were engineers whose names history forgot. What's extraordinary is not just that someone built this device, but how they did it. The gears were hand-cut from bronze, using no modern machinery, and arranged with tolerances precise enough to perform complex calculations. Not bad for a civilization that didn't even have the decimal point. This wasn't the product of guesswork. It was a culmination of mathematics, metallurgy, and astronomical insight. And yet, no other mechanisms like it have ever been found. No texts describe its construction. It seems to have emerged fully formed, an engineering marvel in a world that, until this discovery, we never imagined was capable of such things. If the Antikythera Mechanism was part of a wider tradition of advanced engineering, then why does it stand alone? Why haven't we found more like it? That's the mystery that haunts this discovery. Despite its sophistication, no similar devices have ever been recovered. No detailed ancient texts describe its construction. For over 1,000 years after its creation, we find no machines with comparable complexity. It's as if the knowledge vanished overnight and history hit a reset button. There are several theories. One is that the mechanism was created by a small circle of elite scholars whose work was never widely shared. When Rome absorbed the Greek world, scientific inquiry gave way to military expansion and administrative control. The Greek passion for inquiry faded beneath centuries of empire, conquest, and collapse. Another possibility lies in destruction. Fires in libraries like Alexandria, invasions, and cultural shifts all played a role in erasing ancient science. As the Roman Empire fell, and later, as early Christianity reshaped intellectual life, devices rooted in pagan cosmology may have been neglected or deliberately forgotten. Just like ancient scrolls turned to ash in library fires, our own knowledge stored on servers could vanish with the flip of a switch. Historian Tony Freeth once observed, "This wasn't just a piece of gearwork, it was a window into an entire worldview." And that worldview, tied to a mechanical understanding of the cosmos, may have been too fragile to survive the tides of time. The tragedy isn't just the loss, it's how complete the disappearance was. If this knowledge vanished once, it could vanish again. Today, we store our information on digital media that may not last a century. Hard drives fail. Formats become obsolete. Climate, war, or neglect could erase our legacy as easily as it did theirs. The Antikythera Mechanism is a marvel, yes, but it's also a warning. Knowledge isn't immortal, and progress is never guaranteed. If you're enjoying the video and want to support the channel, hit that super thanks button. It really helps us keep exploring the deep, weird corners of history. To fully grasp the purpose of the Antikythera Mechanism, we have to step outside the modern mindset. Today, we tend to draw a hard line between science and belief, between logic and meaning. But for the ancient Greeks, the heavens were not just a puzzle to be solved, they were a language of the divine. Astronomy and religion weren't separate disciplines. They were part of a single worldview where observing the stars was a form of worship, and predicting their movements gave insight into fate itself. Eclipses, planetary alignments, and lunar phases weren't just natural events. They were signs, omens, and rhythms that connected the human world to cosmic order. The Antikythera Mechanism reflects that synthesis. One dial tracked solar time. Another modeled the phases of the moon. Others likely predicted eclipses and mapped the movements of known planets. But the machine also included a calendar of sacred athletic festivals, including the Olympic Games, rituals deeply tied to the gods. This wasn't just a scientific tool, it was a spiritual one, a mechanical prayer wheel built not just to observe the divine, but to sync with it. And yet, its construction was pure precision. Every gear had to be cut to a specific size, every ratio chosen with care. It used engineering to express theology, a bronze model of a cosmos that was both mechanical and meaningful. That combination is what makes the device so compelling. It challenges the assumption that ancient people were mystics without method, or scientists without soul. The Antikythera Mechanism was both a machine built not just to chart the heavens, but to mirror the divine clockwork they believed governed all things. In its turning gears, the ancients weren't just watching the sky, they believed they were aligning themselves with the will of the universe. When the Antikythera Mechanism was first understood as a working computer, it didn't just surprise archaeologists, it forced an entire academic field to rethink its assumptions. Before this discovery, the prevailing belief was that such intricate mechanical technology didn't exist until the medieval period. But this single device, over 2,000 years old, showed otherwise. It proved that the ancient Greeks weren't just philosophers and poets, they were engineers, inventors, mathematicians who could build analog machines that rivaled anything made before the industrial age. Since then, the mechanism has inspired an international wave of research, reconstructions, and reimaginings. Michael Wright's and Tony Freeth's models have been featured in major museums. Digital versions are used in classrooms to teach astronomy, geometry, and the history of technology. Working replicas, made using ancient techniques, demonstrate how the entire system functioned, gear by gear. It's even found its way into pop culture. On the Joe Rogan Experience, guests like Graham Hancock have called it an ancient GPS, speculating about lost civilizations and hidden knowledge. While mainstream scholars push back on those ideas, the enthusiasm reflects something deeper, a hunger to believe that the past still holds secrets. And maybe it does. The Antikythera Mechanism has also reshaped how archaeologists approach other discoveries. Where once corroded metal might be dismissed as debris, it's now seen as a potential clue, an invitation to look closer, to ask better questions. We use apps to track the moon. They used bronze gears. In a world increasingly defined by complex technology, there's something strangely humbling about knowing that 2,000 years ago, someone built a cosmic calculator with nothing but bronze, patience, and brilliance. It didn't just survive. It endured long enough to remind us that the future sometimes begins in the past. The Antikythera Mechanism wasn't found in a library or temple. It was discovered by accident, tangled in the ruins of a sunken ship, buried under centuries of silt and salt, which raises a tantalizing question. If this machine survived, purely by chance, what else is still out there? The Mediterranean is dotted with shipwrecks, over 50,000 by some estimates, many of them unexplored. Some are too deep, others are too fragile to excavate. In many cases, their locations are known, but budgets and technology haven't caught up with curiosity. These wrecks aren't just collections of amphorae or coins, they are snapshots of ancient lives, trading routes, rituals, innovations, frozen in time. Even the Antikythera wreck itself may be hiding more. In 2016, new underwater excavations revealed additional cargo, bronze arms, marble statues, and a mysterious disc with gear-like shapes. researchers haven't ruled out the possibility that it could be another part of the original mechanism, or even a second device. But the real point isn't what's already been found, it's what hasn't. The Antikythera mechanism may not have been unique. It might have been part of a lost technological tradition, used by astronomers, scholars, or navigators whose tools vanished when their world collapsed. And as underwater archaeology advances, more of that world could come to light. Every discovery chips away at the myth of linear progress, the idea that history only moves forward. Somewhere beneath the waves, another machine might be waiting, one crank turn away from rewriting history again. Because sometimes we find machines that shouldn't exist, and when we do, we're reminded that innovation isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's a wave, rising, crashing, and waiting patiently beneath the surface until someone, somewhere, brings it back into the light. The Antikythera mechanism is more than just an archaeological oddity. It's a time machine in the truest sense, one that lets us see not only into the past, but into a world of ancient possibility that we barely imagined existed. For centuries, we assumed that technological complexity belonged to the modern world, that gearwork, predictive systems, and mechanical computation were products of the industrial age. And yet, here it is, built in bronze, powered by hand, created in an era without steel tools or magnifying lenses, a cosmic calculator forged by minds we rarely give enough credit. And now, the moment we promised. Inside the mechanism, researchers discovered one gear with exactly 223 teeth. That's not a guess, it's deliberate. Why 23? Because that number matches the Saros cycle, a period of 223 lunar months after which solar and lunar eclipses repeat. The ancient Babylonians had tracked it centuries earlier, but the Greeks didn't just know it. They engineered it. They encoded it in metal. That single gear proves that this wasn't a lucky guess. It was a scientific instrument designed to anticipate the rhythms of the sky, one turn of the crank at a time. The Antikythera mechanism didn't just survive because it was buried. It endured because it was unforgettable. A whisper from a vanished world that tells us progress is fragile, knowledge is perishable, and genius is not bound by time. In a world where we store our memories in the cloud and our technologies in glass, it's worth remembering that sometimes the most extraordinary machines are the ones that rust and still turn. They remind us that genius doesn't always wear a lab coat, and sometimes history's greatest minds left no name behind. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of the most extraordinary machines ever discovered. If the story of the Antikythera mechanism left you wondering what else might lie hidden in the ruins of our past, help us keep exploring. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Armchair Archaeology, and ring the bell so you never miss our next discovery. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What other ancient wonders should we investigate next? Drop your ideas in the comments. And if this kind of ancient mystery lights your fire, you'll love our book, Secrets of the Ancient World. It's packed with stories like this one, and it's written just for curious minds like yours. Until then, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep the spirit of curiosity alive.